Joined today by Jonathan Lea of the Jonathan Lea Network. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Really good to see you. And today we're going to talk about business law and the intersection between business law and politics, because Jonathan and I met through, it was a LinkedIn post that he put up around a Roll on Friday article that he had been discussed in. And I'm always really curious, particularly when it comes to lawyers that kind of speak their mind and are able to say things outside of that box of this is the way things ought to be. I'm always curious about that. I'm curious from a professional perspective, but also from a personal perspective. So I got in touch with Jonathan, and he and I have been speaking for a while now. Jonathan, why don't you give us a little bit of background to who you are, what you do, but also those kind of add-on pieces that have, over the last year, become a part of your role?
Sure, yeah. So, I own and run a firm of solicitors called the Jonathan Lea Network, so slightly original name. Partly that relates to the fact that we're comprised of a retained team of employees in Haywards Heath, where we're based, mid-Sussex, and then we have a wider network of self-employed consultant solicitors who work alongside us invariably from their home offices in the UK or further afield in other countries as well. I've kind of got somewhat of a background in politics and taking interest in current affairs. I did a politics degree, started studying economics and politics at Bristol University, and then eventually graduated just a politics degree, and taken an interest over the years in what's going on and the agendas that play and the people behind those that get put up in front of us on the TVs, etc. And anyway, so I think that's sort of going forward to the present day. As soon as the whole coronavirus, COVID pandemic, whatever you want to call, started appearing in the press, kind of immediately smelt a stinking rat, and given all the usual suspects involved, and the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, and Bill Gates and all the rest of it, and knowing a bit about those people and what's been attempted in the past relating to pandemics as well, and the role of the pharmaceutical companies and all of this, and I could kind of like see where things were going. And so this, every sort of turn of events of this narrative, as it were, I keep thinking, surely people aren't going to still go along with this. Surely this doesn't make sense or add up, and this all sounds increasingly ridiculous. But despite that happening and things getting even ongoing, getting increasingly crazier, people still dig in and will determine, for whatever reason, I still quite can't make out, to follow the narrative and the programming, as it were, and do what we're kind of effectively told by those people at the BBC and in government who sort of blasted out the TVs and the news at us all the time.
I was going to ask you, what do you think is going on? But I think you answered that in that last question, which is, I'm entirely confused, because I think that's often what most people say, is I'm not quite sure why there is so much compliance. But I want to know about you as an individual, because you started speaking out, and this got picked up for various things in I was going to say various different media, because I kind of make the assumption it wasn't just Roll on Friday. How did you feel about that? Have you always been somebody that was quite okay with personal, I'm going to say personal attacks, because I'm not sure it necessarily was an attack, but there was definitely an element of that. how did that affect
you? Yeah, I don't think I'm really affected by it that much. I don't think I sort of lost any sleep about it or was concerned in any way, which maybe is, why I've kind of been relatively also outspoken. Well, I don't really think so. I have been myself, but I've been relatively filtered, as it were. But yeah, compared to most other people, why that is, I don't quite know. I don't know. I kind of like come from quite a large family. Parents divorced, was quite young, so I'm used to sort of people putting different spins on different on things being interpreted in different ways. Yeah, again, most people in my family are sort of business owners, I think, so maybe they're used to a certain degree of independence. And I think, yeah, going to sort of boarding school as well, that maybe develops a bit of a harder. Yeah, you're used to getting all that kind of stuff thrown at you, and what you might call it, the banter or what have you, and being maybe more comfortable being an individual, although some people it goes the other way. But yeah, doing a politics degree at university, and a lot of that was effectively studying propaganda techniques and looking at history with maybe a different perspective, particularly recent history. So you kind of like know what to spot, as it were, regardless of whether it's the UK or another country. And then I remember there was before the sort of second Iraq war, there was an MTV debate which got a lot of press attention, where they selected 40 students, young people from 28 countries, I think it was, to, in inverted commas, grill Tony Blair, which was sort of a couple of weeks before it all kicked off, and was kind of like, in retrospect, kind of more used as part of the propaganda play to try and get more young people to go along with the agenda, as it were, to understand why this was a necessary event. Because at the time there was a lot of popular public resistance. There were sort of big demonstrations in London. But anyway, I had a bit of spare time at law school at the time, and this form got circulated around, and I filled it in, and then they selected me for one of the people to go on this show, and then I was selected as one of the people to ask one of the six lead questions.
Wow.
So yeah, that was sort of not me, but there's a picture of Tony Blair with the MTV logo behind him on the front page of the Times the next day, and that was picked up with most mainstream media. And the question I asked at the time, that was back in 2003, was related to what became known as the dodgy dossier, and like why you were relying on a plagiarized 10-year-old PhD essay as part of your current, in inverted commas, evidence, as it were, for the renewed military campaign in Iraq. So I guess even back then I was finding
you've got an eye for it, is what you're saying.
Yeah. So I guess I'm quite I guess it's kind of like an intellectual thing, I guess, and you want to. I like researching things. As a lawyer, that's kind of what your job is, to sort of dig into things, and you can always you're always representing one side of against another. So maybe that sort of comes more naturally to people with a legal background training. But anyway, I think then sort of maybe later on, I mean, I started a career at Clyde & Co, where again, that sort of maybe increases your working at a firm like that increases your what's the word, your cynicism, as it were. And part of the reason why I got that job, that training contract, was because I could talk to them about the experience on the MTV debate, and what led to me going on to that. And the person, one of the partners who's interviewing me, was the previous naval attaché to Russia, so had an experience in working in intelligence, as it were. So was I guess appreciative of my ability to sort of see through things. But then you're working somewhere at Clyde & Co, and you're kind of like really quite on the inside, as it were. So we were at, one of the things I did there was like working for the government as our client on like the biggest ever class action that was ever brought in the UK, and you could see like the headlines in the press that were related to our case, which is the rail track case, which didn't really kind of match up to what I was kind of discovering, and then you see a bit what happens sort of in the background, as it were.
There's a wisdom in being in the inner circle, and yet you can see. I also worked for government years ago. I was working at a law firm, working for government, and it was a program which effectively was around identity cards, but it was for 2 years. And then there was one statement in Parliament that was made about this project that had cost millions a week for 18 months. And it was one statement made in government. And that made me go, oh, wow, it gave me some perspective, because if something as big as that, with as many people as it did, got brushed under the carpet with one sentence, what else was possible? Yeah, propaganda is an interesting one, because
you have to have a thirst, I guess, to sort of find and research that information. It seems like a lot of people that they find that really uncomfortable, and even though you may come up with the most blindingly obvious sort of hole in the narrative or fact that doesn't add up, and people sort of dig their heels even more, and they don't want to know. It's too uncomfortable. They want to preserve this kind of like childhood naivety in some ways. Some people say that they and don't want to be responsible